TammyPepperman.org. How do I introduce this this beautiful being? There's not a lot of people that I get on this show that kill my any ego that might be building up, because when I talk to Tammy and when I pick her brain, I realize always that I am on the lowest knoll of a very high mountain of knowledge that I need to understand. And it's not just knowledge. It's not just facts and figures, things to understand and comprehend. What I realize is that when I talk to Tammy, which is unfortunately not as often as I'd like, things change. Reality changes. I don't know anybody else really that can explain the reality of this fiction that we all have been tombed inside of, that we all are enslaved by. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce yet again Tammy Pepperman. Welcome to the show, Tammy.
Hi, how are you?
Very, very good. I listened to most of your show that you did last night, and I sensed a bit of frustration, a bit of sadness, a bit of anger, a bunch of emotions rolling around, and I understand exactly why you're feeling that way. I think many of us out here are feeling the same way. And that is because, correct me if I'm wrong, I at least can have some hope that we're entering into a period where there's either going to be what you might call a grand awakening as purported in the Bible, or there's just going to be complete and utter chaotic tyranny, and it's just going to get worse and worse. And I think the frustration that I heard in your voice is based on the fact that it feels like people are just not taking action to change things. And I just wanted to get your take on that, because I know, for instance, one of the things you said on your broadcast was, hey, you know what? Here's a harsh dose of reality, but don't worry, in a couple hours, you'll be right as rain. Have a cookie. Everything will be fine. You'll forget about all the horrible things that are happening that we're talking about today. And I know exactly what you mean.
Absolutely, and it's all socially engineered. The media, the Broadcasting Board of Governors has full control over all international, civil, United States media. That means that it's feeding everybody the same television programming over the airwaves, the same radio broadcasting over the airwaves, as they feel necessary to make the human being and socially engineer it into the perfect product. And when they're patronizing that thing, I just want to pull my hair out. It doesn't end.
Well, and on that note, and when I say that you sort of alter my reality and certainly hack down any ego that I might start taking upon myself, I want to start out by, first of all, saying that, we're going to talk about things that perhaps nobody's ever even thought of before today. Because, for instance, you don't think of the Judicial as a bank. However, that's exactly what it is. We'll get into that later. But what I want to start out with today is why we don't know this is happening to us, why we don't know our collective disposition, why we have no idea. And that really stems from one very important thing, which is also a monopoly of this thing we call government, which is education. Now, you recommended a book, and I still have it on my list, and it's a long book, so I haven't read it yet, but it's called Emile. Could you give sort of a breakdown of that book?
Emile is called the Treatise on Education. It's by Rousseau, and it's basically how to break the human being for dummies. That's a book about how to break a human being and mold it into a farm animal. And the foundation of the word pedagogy stems from education or attendance on boys. And in that manner, that is the metaphor of removal of the firstborn son. It depends on how you're marked or your door is marked. If you have the money for education, you can be an elite for a short amount of time. If you don't have the money for an education, you're going to be lower and lower and lower on the totem pole and used as a farm animal, when in reality education is perverting relativity itself. Nobody's using analytical thought anymore. Nobody's thinking for themselves. They're just taking on these concepts that are sold by the same law merchant that is selling the laws of everything. That is the action itself of nomenclature. Nomenclature means to grab something and give it a law or give it a name.
Mm. Yeah, and of course we discussed that actually yesterday, that all nouns, noun actually means name, and so you're basically constantly speaking in this language that sort of gets you in trouble, because everything you name or that you call a rock, a tree, a dog, those are all legal words, and we don't even realize it. The great quote that I was trying to remember the other day, and someone sent it to me in the mail: "Give me the children until they are 7, and anyone may have them afterwards." Of course, that was Pope St. Francis Xavier. Now, in this book, Emile, I'm sorry, who was the author again?
Rousseau.
So that's right. Doesn't it also go into, well, we have to sort of teach and ingrain these children in the concept of, and I'm sorry, folks, some of you aren't going to like it, but you're in the corporation nation where anything goes. Truth and reality will come to the surface. Doesn't that include a bit of patriotism as well?
Absolutely. The state and civil society, according to Gramsci's theory of hegemony, which is the use of the media to maintain status quo power structures, he just simply describes it as the force and consent. So you have the guns, you have the lawmakers, you have the law enforcement, and on the other end of that you have the consent, which is patriotism, calling that thing your father.
And basically the concept of being a good subject or citizen means that you are a child and that the state is your new father. You're basically subverting what's written in the Bible, of course, but also you're going against. Well, I wouldn't say you're going against. You're actually utilizing the worst maxims of law, buyer beware, and all of those, to actually implement yourself as a child of the state. All right, folks, we'll be back right after these messages. Nation, we're here with Tammy Pepperman, TamiPepperman.org, and of course that's Tami, Pepperman.org. You know, I don't even know where to begin with you, Tam. I mean, I had to just let you rant the whole time, but I actually enjoy bantering back and forth. But speaking of education, of course, again, patriotism, very similar to or based upon the concept of Zionism, same kind of concept. This is a very important part of the education process. Of course, we've also read on air here the court case that happened because a child refused to say the Pledge of Allegiance back in the days when they actually used to put their whole arm in the air, communist style, and that was the desired way for the Pledge of Allegiance to be said, to hold your hand out, Heil Hitler style, and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, of course, this kid, because he refused to say it, his parents got in trouble and got fined, and it was forced. It wasn't a choice, and very important to include that type of indoctrination into the education process, and that's all pre-planned by such books as Emile, correct?
Right. That's how to create a subject or create a new product of a corporation. And as you speak so eloquently, this is a corporation, so it requires product. And that is what is actually written in Genesis, which is the doctrine of abiogenesis. It says that the Lord God created man in man's own image. So you look like you, but here you are, you're being created by education to be a product of a corporation. And that's absolutely away from God, which is what the next book is. Exodus means away from or outside of God. And in Exodus, they offered you a judge and said, here, it will determine your life. It can be your authority, and you can call it Father. And that was the perversion of the entire human race itself, because that Lord God decided that it wanted to control it as a farm animal.
Well, and let's step back a minute to make sure people understand what you are saying here. You are not talking about Creator God, which is something that is, well, I mean, you could say it's undefinable. It's not something that we can literally, comprehend, really. What you're talking about is, as religions do, and governments do, government, religion, what's the difference? When you say Lord God, you're not capitalizing those two words. You're referring specifically to popes, kings, etc., right?
Yes, and at this time it's Congress, and that word Congress means with transgression. That is your transgressor. It is defined as a confederacy. It called itself a confederacy. Confederacy, defined in Black's Law Dictionary, maintains that it is a criminal enterprise.
Absolutely. It's actually funny to look up those words. Look up the word constitution, and in Bouvier's you find out that it's nothing more or less than a debt contract. I mean, debt compact. It's, and a constitutor is a debtor. So, as far as the Lord God, now this is where I actually get confused, Tammy, because, often, I was talking to you about this earlier. We're constantly trying to outdo each other and say, no, you're not supposed to say person, you're supposed to say people. Well, no, you're not supposed to say people, you're supposed to say man. No, you're not supposed to say man, you're supposed to say human. Which of these are not creations of man or the Lord God? Now, you said the Lord God created man in his own image, and from what I know, and it's very limited compared to you, I admit, you're saying that the artificial person, the straw man, the fictional person that we impersonate as citizen, as all the things that we do in commerce, that is what the Lord God, which is the kings and in other words, man, created in its own image, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And you are a state of being. Before Congress seceded or took over your estate, you are the United States of being. They capitalized upon you. And that's why you see the capital U and the capital S. They're tricking you out since Article 12 of the Articles of Confederation, where they pledged you, the United States, and charged you, the United States, to discharge its bankrupt state.
Well, and when you say pledged you, do you mean me as a being, or do you mean my the numbers and fictions that are attached to me? In other words, what was created in my image, the person, the artificial construct, my identity, for instance. My identity through identity theft can be stolen. So are you speaking of me, the flesh, or me as a representation?
Both, because you're the one that takes up the concepts of title. They own the word man, they own the word woman, they own the word individual, and they make you defend those titles by calling you a bad taxpayer or a bad dad. That makes you defend the title of dad. That's a corporate product, that title of dad. And so all of these things are cashing in all around on your energy, which is the action of currency. Those words stems from current side. They're killing your energy and moving it into something else. They're allowing you to take up a title, which is actually the ohm. It's a form of resistance. And at that resistance, they're selling you back whatever you're creating out of that ownership of the title, because you're grasping it.
And it's all being administered, excuse me, through the administrative or justice system, which is the next subject I really want to comprehend here. Because, okay, we have this constitution that was created, and in that constitution was created the concept of a judicial branch, but it wasn't actually created by the Constitution. Later on, I think it's 1789, you had the Judiciary Act. But really, if a judge is adjudicating your person and not actually you, in other words, the property of government, the citizen, the estate, and all of these things that we attach to the fictional realm of law, well then, really, and interestingly, when we look up the word, I'm going off the cuff here, when we look up the word court, it actually is defined as bank. Is that not correct?
Absolutely. And when they offer you those names, those are the deposits in the bank. That's what's securing the mortgage-backed securities. That's what's securing the certificates of deposits. The attorneys are tricking you out. Those are bankers. And so they're allowing you to defend those titles, and each time they're cashing in. And not just through the bank as a court, but the bank as a hospital, or any of their other products. They own insurance. They own the medical industry. They own the psychological industry. They own the criminal industry. And all of those products and titles are things you're buying.
All right, folks, stay tuned. We'll be back. Welcome back, folks. You're in the Corporation Nation. So much to talk about today. Tammy Pepperman's my guest. That's Tami, pepperman.org. And Tammy, tell people when your radio station is, Thursdays and Saturdays.
We're on Thursdays and Saturdays on freedomslips.com, and it's Leaving the Farm. And on Thursdays, it's 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which plays at the same time that Clint does, so I don't expect anybody to come over. And on Saturday nights, it's 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Studio B as well over there. And then we have another show now on Fridays, and you can catch that at TamiPepperman.org and hear it on No Borders Radio.
Oh, I'm not keeping you from that, am I?
No, it's tonight at 10. It's right after the show.
Oh, so you don't even get a break then?
No.
Well, if you're real good, I might let you go early. Well, okay. So again, we're talking about. So this is what I mean. By people, we have to shift our consciousness. We have to become aware of what is actually happening to us. We have to understand that the judiciary is a bank, and that this bar association is a bunch of bankers essentially that are administering and moving around and suing and doing all these things with our estates, with the if you have everything registered in a person with a surname and all that, then you don't really own anything. It's all property of this conglomerate corporate structure that we're talking about. So, all right. So the Constitution, again, did not in any way create a judicial branch of government. It made, I guess you could say, recommendations for a judicial branch. So, in fact, and this is fact, The judicial is actually an act of Congress, so it is in the congressional. I mean, is there really a separate branch called the judicial, or is that? I mean, if it's created by Congress,
it's created by Congress, and the law merchant was handed down from the law merchant to the negotiable instrument acts, and now it's called Uniform Commercial Code. And the people who are actually maintaining those codes or tricking everybody out is only according to market conditions. And those are the folks on the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Senate Judiciary Committee, the legislative branch and the judicial branch in the same body acting for and on behalf of Congress.
Is there any way at all that Congress members do not know this?
Absolutely not.
I tend to agree. So what was created with the 1789 Judiciary Act? I mean, what exactly is this thing?
Well, Congress owns the original 13 colonies, which they sold everybody that they were representing these places that never existed until the human being took that up as a concept in the first place. The 1789 Judiciary Act was a bank routing system into those original 13 colonies. And so if you go into court, like in LA County, California, it depends on the day of the year whether or not you're in Delaware, or you're actually in New Hampshire, or you're in another of the 13 colonies that were established by Congress. It all goes back to Congress, and that's what the Internal Revenue Service is. It generates revenue into those banks.
Is that why there's such a majority of corporations that are incorporated in Delaware?
Absolutely, because in 1933, Congress declared bankruptcy and told the corporations that you were all product of those corporations. That's what it said in the 1933 bankruptcy. When Congress came in as the trustee of its own bankruptcy, it came in as a trustee over itself. And it just continued this on at a faster pace after the 1933 bankruptcy. And then the Emergency Banking Act allowed the attorney to pledge itself to Congress. The judge takes an oath to Congress under 28 U.S.C. subsection 453, and it's pledging an oath to discharge congressional bankruptcy while you're in front of it. The attorney's oath is under the Banking Act of 12 U.S.C. subsection 73, where the attorney's saying, no, I'm not hypothecated, my client is.
Well, and let's read that real quick. 28 U.S. Code 453, oaths of justices and judges. I, XXX, all capital, do solemnly swear or affirm, meaning I refuse to allow God to be my judge, that I will administer justice without respect to persons.
Without seeing them again.
Exactly.
Respect.
And do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as X under the Constitution laws of the United States, so help me God.
Absolutely.
Well, there's the two words. So what does that mean, to discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me under the Constitution laws of the United States? What does that mean to discharge?
The original Constitution went from Article 1 to Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3. No bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. In that part of the Constitution, the human being under Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 and 2 was put on general welfare. The corporations were to be maintaining you on welfare. And what they did was they abrogated that contract and came in with the Articles of Confederation, Article 12, charged and pledged you to discharge its debt. So it wrapped a millstone around your neck instead of the millstone around the corporation's neck. And what it's discharging is its original duty to you, the human being.
Oh, that's a mouthful. So I think I'm going to have you clear that up a little bit. So in other words, it created. Oh, well, let's go back a little bit. Let's go to 1790 when the Patent Act was created. Now the Patent Act was literally to patent the name, right? The name of each of our persons.
Absolutely. And even prior to that, they were picking human beings up by letters patent in the description. Now, your last name is not a family name as you know it. It's a family name as a genus or a new species. So Richard's son, that's a new species, a stock option in the stock market. Eric's son is a new species. That's a description. And allowing them to have the patent on that description. You are not that thing. And Jesus said that in Matthew 12. He says, don't call me Jesus Davidson. How dare you? How can you call me Lord and sit thee, Lord, at my right, and I'll make thy enemies a footstool. He says, how is that possible for you to call me Jesus David's son? I'm just Jesus. Don't describe me. That's the Book of Dead.
Well, and, we've certainly discussed the surname quite often every Wednesday with Daniel from Christian Remedy and Law, but, and we try to explain this, and I'm glad you're here to really put this into terms we can understand. That surname, the agdamen, I think it's called, is part of the nomenclature of the patent. In other words, it's a piece of property attached to your Christian name, again, Christ, Jesus, and in that way, as you say, it's hard to, again, these concepts are very hard to imagine, but once you kind of grasp them, everything starts making a whole lot of strange sense, and you realize what a strange world you live in. But literally adding that surname, as you say, it's almost similar to, correct me if I'm wrong here, it's almost similar to Monsanto or some other crazy corporation creating a new stock of corn or mixing a spider and a goat to create goats that have spider silk in their milk, and then patenting that new creation, or, as you say, species. Is that, it's sort of similar to attaching a surname, right?
Absolutely, because it's describing you. It's a Lord God. It's somebody else saying they own you to give you that name. It's their patented product, is that description. Language is their patented product. Psychology is their patented product. We didn't have languages when we were in a relative state. We spoke to each other likely in grunts and stuff, but it wasn't in this manner. The language itself is brought to you by the law merchant. It stems from their lexicons. Lexicon means with law.
Well, it's just crazy stuff. Well, I'll tell you what, stay with us, folks. We're going to be back. We've got a lot more to talk about. Oh, so there is a concept that really needs to be put out there. And again, we are talking. It may very well seem to people that today that we sound crazy, that we're talking esoterically, that But in reality, this stuff, when you start looking into this stuff, thanks to Tammy, I've certainly looked a lot deeper. You really start to change your perspective. For instance, we talked about the judiciary acting as basically an administrative bank, administering you or your person, you as surety, of course, as a financial instrument, basically. Now, this turns over and becomes very interesting because, as we said, the legal language, as it's been applied, covers a heck of a lot of the English language that we use today. Now, Tammy just sent me this link, and I'm not sure that I can explain it. I'll have her explain what, before I read this, what exactly this means. Now, Tammy, you sent me a link, and we've discussed this briefly before, but not in full detail. The word thesaurus, and how words are actually worth money because they're concepts, they're titles. Explain that a little bit.
Right, and this stems from the metaphor of the tree of knowledge. The tree of knowledge only bears fruit called concepts, not apples. That's like saying that an elephant gives birth to mice. If you look at the concept, now you've been sold not only these concepts, but then perverted concepts of what the tree of knowledge actually is. Each word, each title you take up, each diagnosis you take up is worth money to attorneys. They own the medical industry. They own the insurance. They own the corporations. They're sitting on the board of governors. That's what Congress is. 80% of Congress is attorneys. All of these things are making money off of your energy using that resistance of title. So if they teach you from when you're little through the indoctrination program called education, that you're the sinner, you're always earning the right to be. You want to be called something. When I get older, I want to be, and you strive to be. And in striving to be without realizing that you already are, I am, like Jesus said, you're buying those concepts from the same law merchant that's telling you you're bad in the first place using its teachers, which are priests and scribes and Pharisees. The same writers, the same media, the same teachers, the same priests, working on behalf of the same attorneys.
Well, so let's take an example. Why are medical records so coveted and valued by this government? Well, let's take the DSM-5 we're on, which is the book of psychiatry and all the different diseases. And why don't they just call it dementia? Well, no, we can't just call it dementia. We have to call it Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's disease. We have to call it this and that, because those are different words in the thesaurus, right? So every time that you are diagnosed and you accept the concept that I am a man with herpes, I am a man with dementia, or with 3 different kinds of Lewy bodies and Alzheimer's, I'm a man with a broken arm, I'm a man, each one of those are somehow, and I don't fully understand this, I admit, worth a price, worth money.
Right, and you're reading from the DSM, but it stems from the International Classification of Diseases and Disorders. Right now they're on version 10, so it's the ICD-10. Yeah. And through the court process, these bankers are cashing in. That's one of their insurance products. So when you go into the hospital or when you go to the doctor and you're diagnosed, they're insuring this diagnosis because it's the doctor who's telling you what you have. Last year, we were able to evidence genocide because Bo's mother was diagnosed without any pathology whatsoever with cancer, but she bought the concept that she had cancer, and ultimately it killed her because they put her on chemotherapy, then they put her on radiation, and she was buying all these concepts because she's a female in the society. She's seeking love. She's seeking kindness. She's feeling dis-ease. She's feeling discomfort. She's feeling ill. Because she's taught that she's ill. She's taught that through the television programming. She's taught that if she has a cramp in her leg, don't run out and eat potassium because you're low on potassium, but it must be from something else. So you need that doctor, and that's what they've been teaching you. You need these things. You need to be called something. You need to have an identity. You have to have a self. Well, wait a second. Who told you you were naked in the first place? It was the same education that told you you were naked, and that made you ashamed to be seen. And ever since then, you have been buying concepts from the law merchant.
Well, let's see if I can get through this here before the break. Now we're on the Avalon. The Yale Avalon Law website, which is avalon.law.yale.edu. And I'll tell you, if you want to learn what Tammy knows, you're going to have to go through this whole damn thing, which is a lot. It covers all of the past treaties and everything. This is called the Dialogue Concerning the Executure, circa 1180. I'm just going to read this part. Number 14. In Roman numerals says thesaurus sometimes means the money itself. Now, when we're talking about thesaurus, folks, we're talking about that little book you can go buy that explains that this word is similar to all these words and is not similar to all of these other words. That's a thesaurus, all right? Thesaurus sometimes means the money itself, sometimes the place where it is kept. Know, moreover, that thesaurus sometimes mean the money in cash itself, as well as gold or silver vessels of different kinds, and changes of vestments. According to this acceptation, it is said, where thy treasure is, there will thy heart be also. For thesaurus is called the place in which it reposes. Therefore, thesaurus equals Ari thesis, I don't know, namely the place of gold. So that if one asks about someone where he is, it may not incongruously be replied, he is in the thesaurus. That is, in the place where the thesaurus is kept. So where all the words are kept, where all the nouns are kept, all the legal language is kept, that's where we are. We are trapped in the thesaurus. Cash money, indeed, or the other things mentioned, having once been put in a safe place, are not taken away except when by mandate of the king. And, they are sent to him to be distributed for his necessary uses. But there are many things in the repository vaults of the treasury which are carried around, and they are shut up and guarded by the treasurer and the chamberlains, as has been more fully shown above. And this is a very long document. Such are the seal of the king concerning which thou cost ask, the Doomsday Book, which I want to ask you about, the so-called exactory roll, which some name the writ of farms. So think the Farm Bureau. Likewise, the great yearly pipe rolls, the rolls of accounts of numerous multitude of privileges, counter tallies, of receipts and rolls of receipts, and writs of the king concerning outlays of the treasury. Outlays simply means to spend, and many other things which, when the executure is in session, are necessary to its daily uses. That's interesting because it's basically telling us that we're literally lost in the legal language, the thesaurus.
Absolutely. And the word county stems from the counter, where they count on the farm, which stems from the Forest and Chases Charter. That's what they're acting under, calling you agriculture or human resources.
Oh, I hate that word, human resources. Talk about human trafficking. Interestingly enough, foreign policy or foreign states actually refer to counties. We'll talk about that when we get back, folks. Stay tuned.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite!
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint, your host. With me today is Tammy Pepperman of TammyPepperman.org. That's Tami, Pepperman.com. So I got a question to ask you. Now, lately, I cringe whenever I introduce myself as Clint Richardson, knowing that I'm subscribing to that concept that I am an artificial person with a surname attached to my Christian name. Is that your given birth name from the birth certificate, or is that a name that you use?
Well, that one is the name that I use since we took over that franchise. I came in on and facilitated a hostile takeover, and then a backflip takeover of that franchise using the executor, which is in the two parts. And that's when Bo came in and picked me up on the other side, and that's
Right.
what's required. And now I do use the proper name to identify whatever. However, the site is a product of the incorporated state of Bonai.
Well, and this is interesting because one of the things you said on your show that I was listening to was the concept that when we're talking about when you hear Congress, and again we'll talk about when they say the House of Representatives or the House of Commons. Well, what the hell kind of house is that? And as you say, do we actually live in that house? Well, technically, yeah. Our persons are filed and owned by that house. Are we in the house? No, it's an artificial construct. But you said that foreign policy really relates to not just foreign nations or foreign countries, but to counties within the United States. So when you hear the concept of them talking in government about foreign policy, what are they actually talking about?
The speaking between two foreign states, in between LA County and Jackson County, or in between LA County and Cook County, Illinois. That's interstate and international commerce because those counties are each incorporated states, they're businesses.
Well, and in that regard, wouldn't you also be something? I mean, you're a foreign state of being, so, gee, don't we need foreign policy?
No, you're actually a sovereign state. If you're adhering to the public law, which is human law, means do no harm, period. You don't prostitute children through the court system. When a judge comes in and charges a pedophile for rape of a child, that banker is charging a pedophile for rape on a child. That banker is cashing in on prostitution using a child.
So it's perfectly happy that the child got raped.
Absolutely. That's a diagnosis. On the back end of that victim, that's another word that's sold. The victim is going to be diagnosed with PTSD. It's going to be diagnosed as rape. And they're going to cash in over and over and over again simply because you went to that thing, called it your father, and said, "Daddy, protect me."
Well, okay, so let's take this on a more general scale. Now, that child very well will probably need to have subsistence from, quote unquote, the state. Now, all of us out here say, "Oh God, another child on welfare or on state where it's our taxpayer money, da 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 da." Well, that's not really what it's about, isn't it? I mean, we're out here going, "Oh, we don't want to pay welfare to the poor," but these are all, again, the poor is a concept. Wealth is a concept. All these things are in the thesaurus, right? They're all money. Every one of them. Did we lose you? Uh-oh. Well, it looks like we lost Tammy. This happens at least once per show with Tammy. We always seem to lose her. Tammy, you just chime right in when you come back in. Looks like she's still on this call, but no, she dropped. Always when we're talking to Tammy. So again, we talk about these people out there, these human beings that have accepted all of these titles, these names, these nouns, these descriptive diseases and states of being, all of the different types of, you name it. I'm disabled. Oh, well, great. I get a plaque and I get benefits, but someone else is benefiting from that. So really, Tammy, looks like you're back. We're really profiting off every possible ailment, every possible recovery, any title that you put on to your or status, I guess you could say. And when this kid is receiving welfare, We are trained to think that that's actually harming the general public or the state, but in fact, it's actually enriching it.
Absolutely, and that goes into the realm of genocide and eugenics. Because if that child is not producing for the corporation, that child is going to be killed in some manner after it's met its original use. And that's where the horror is. This is always Nazi Germany. This is always Cambodia and Pol Pot. This is always the same schematic. When they want to cut overhead, a lot of people go away. And that's what happened during Nazi Germany. It was by court process. The Bayer Corporation came in 1927 in front of the world courts. This is the company at Judicial as the Republic of Germany. When it came in, it asked the world courts, which is Congress's courts, to indemnify Poland. And the court ordered, yes, indemnify Poland. And they slaughtered citizens and those on state employ. They slaughtered teachers. They slaughtered doctors. They slaughtered everybody on state employ. That was cutting overhead.
When you say indemnify, indemnity is that which is given to a person to prevent his suffering damage?
No, not out of Black's Law Dictionary. Black's Law Dictionary defines it as taking up an obligation or duty. So when it indemnifies you, it's saying that you're going to take up this obligation or duty.
So it's a duty given to. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Worded differently, but fairly the same. Sometimes it signifies diminution, a tenant who has been interrupted in the enjoyment of his lease, etc. What's interesting is it says see damnification. That's another word that's similar.
That's what it meant when the Lord has damned something. That's not God damning you and putting you into damnation or hell. Hell is defined as the lower chambers of the exchequer. A judge, a Lord God, at the behest of Congress, is putting people in hell by charging and pledging their estates.
And he could put anyone that subscribes to this system as a person, he can put anyone in there because we're all debtors, and hell is a debtor's prison.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what's happening. In 1933, Congress came in as the king and declared bankruptcy, and then the trustee over its own bankrupt state. So that you guys do that.
Yeah, right. We'll read Trafficant's bankruptcy statement when we get back. Stay tuned, folks. Folks, here in the Corporation Nation, we're here with Tammy Pepperman of TammyPepperman.org. Listen to Tammy Pepperman. Leaving the Farm, PH. And her radio show, Leaving the Farm, is now Fridays, too, but it's Thursdays and Saturdays, and apparently now Fridays. So if you want to get more Tammy Pepperman, you can switch over to freedomslips is it .com or .org? I can't remember.
.com, and the public law on Friday can be heard just by going to TammyPepperman.org. We've got the No Borders Radio on there.
Yeah, and you've got you put all your stuff on YouTube as well, right?
Right.
All your interviews.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff on there. All right, so I want to. Like I said, so many topics I want to cover in such a short time. But let's go back and talk about this Book of the Dead, or the Doomsday Book, another thing that is actually written in that same document I was reading earlier, the dialogue concerning the executure. So what the hell, and I mean that literally, is the Doomsday Book being considered in the dialogue concerning the executure? As we discussed, hell defined in Black's Law as the debtor's prison under the executure. So what in hell is the Doomsday Book, or the Book of the Dead, doing in this thing?
It's the exchequer. And when a judge is playing chess, he's the one outside of the board. You're the one on the board. It's a game of chess and the game of risk, which is taking over continents. Now, if you subscribe to living in its house, it's taken over you as a tenant, with tenants, continents. And so
is that Sorry, is that why we call it the Court of Chancery? Because it's a risk. You don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
It's landing on the
Right.
chance on the monopoly board.
Right, and it's up to the attorneys. The attorneys, when they come in on appearance, they're making a bet on the productivity of the entity in front of them. They're betting on their productive value, and then the county itself, it then hedges that bet with municipal hedge funds, and then it covers that bet with certificates of deposits. The other end of the certificate of deposit is a human being in a prison that's certifying that deposit is there in the prison.
Yeah.
They're just cashing in hand over fist. Well, the Book of the Dead is when you start observing those titles, taking those titles up, you're on those pages. You're the one that's being written about by description, which means of writing. So if you describe yourself, you're in the Book of the Dead. Now, the Book of Life is simply by being. You are the authority. You're not a farm animal. You're not a product of a corporation. You are an actual absolute state of being, and a sovereign state of being if you adhere to the public law, which means do no harm. That's it.
So you write your own book.
Absolutely, and that's what it says in Revelation. Once everything is revealed to you, that is your book. Once everything is revealed to you, that's when you hold that thing accountable, because it has the mark of the beast. By its actions, it has the mark of the beast.
Well, let's talk about the concept of revelation, because, I mean, as you've said behind the scenes, we are, again, people don't want to hear this, but listen, folks, we are talking about revelation. We are actually... because when the Bible says, for instance, that the dead will rise and live, guess what, folks? They're talking about all of you civilly dead people. In other words, all of you citizens out there, because you're not alive. You're acting in the person. You've accepted the mark, and you're acting as a dead. In dead hands, you have a dead pledge with your mortgage, you have all these dead things, your dead instrument. What is a revelation but waking up and saying, okay, I'm not going to take part in this. I'm not going to be a citizen. I don't want to have everything, my name itself, be a product of a corporation.
Great. And what had happened was they came in and declared you all dead in the Declaration of Independence. Independent means not opposite of dependent.
Now say that again. I want people to listen to this, folks. I've been trying to figure out what the heck the word independence means for a long time. What does independence mean?
Independence means not the opposite of being dependent. Independent. You are in the state of dependency.
But that's not the way it's defined in modern dictionaries, is it?
No.
And that's not what we learn in education, is it?
No, and that's the whole point. It's teaching you how to be a product for a corporation.
Well, and what's interesting, and I've tried to really expound on this, is that in all the state constitutions and all the declarations and everything, the first thing it does is declare that as beings, it says men, of course, but men have inalienable rights. Okay, well, so you've just established that we can sell everything that God grants us. Okay,
no,
the next thing it does.
Inalienable means that the ownership cannot be transferred.
No,
and so if you're claiming, right, but if you're claiming you have inalienable rights as so-and-so, you're saying, yes, I'm a product of that corporation, and they own me, and it can't be transferred out of that state. So you're actually claiming that you're just stock.
Exactly. And again, the fact that it's called the Declaration of Independence, which literally means you're in a dependent state, right? I mean, how else can you say it?
That's what allowed secessions. To secede something means to take it over upon the death of that individual.
So now we're back to the Book of the Dead. Since everybody was placed into the Book of the Dead, or the Doomsday Book, if you will, that left basically all of the lands and properties in a lodal status completely unclaimed, right?
Right, lost at the Sea of Commerce. And that's what Jesus was trying to teach. Jesus didn't walk on water, he walked on the Sea of Commerce. He didn't enter into the Sea of Commerce. He was not taking up any titles.
So, why does it have to be so convoluted and difficult to understand? I mean, all of this, it is, isn't it? I mean, all of this just to establish a slave colony, human trafficking around the world, and yet the opposite of this, which again, revelation, to actually realize you're in a dead pledge, and to wake up from that and be alive again, and it's so simple. You don't have to do any of these things. You don't have to show that you're in a state of being. You don't have to prove it. You're now a negative. You can't prove a negative. There's no way that they can, aside from, of course, brute force, there's nothing they can do to you because you're suddenly awake. And when we hear people say, "Hey, wake up, wake up, wake up," boy, they have no idea, do they?
No, and that's the most beautiful thing about all of Revelation is your particular armaments that you wear. And as you're teaching these things and people are closing their eyes, that's the action of the angel telling them eat up the scroll, and they're finding it hard to swallow.
Gotcha. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned. You're in the Corporation Nation. We're talking to Tammy Pepperman today, TammyPepperman.org. Tammy, do you have anything else that you'd like to say about this? Because, I mean, really, we are, and I never would have put myself in this position. I never would have admitted this, if you will. I would have never talked like this before, just less than a year ago, before I started doing this show and having so many guests on and discovering the Bible as a book that is completely separate from all that religious garbage out there, as a teaching tool. I never would have said this, but yeah, we are literally trying to spread the knowledge of what this concept of waking up and from the death that we all live every day. It sounds strange, but this is the awakening, and the grand awakening as talked about in the Bible. That is what it's talking about, isn't it?
It is. That's what apocalypse is. The word apocalypse comes from Greek, the word apo, and kalyptine. It means to bring forth from a hidden state. And that's all it is. The revelation is to reveal. And Revelation itself, the book, is your actual walk. And John opens up with, some really helpful advice. And he comes towards the churches, which means people. It just means groups of humanity. A church is a group of people. And John says, look, this is what you need to avoid. This is what you need to avoid. This is what you need to avoid, and separate yourself from that, which is what Jesus had said originally. And of course, Jesus always said, divest yourself of all that possesses you. Stop holding those constitutions. Stop holding on to those titles. Get rid of those things so that you can be free, and that the kingdom, your kingdom of heaven, is no longer shut up, because it's shut up just simply in all of these products of the law merchant.
And for God's sake, don't turn your community church into a 501c3 corporation. Of all things, do not incorporate, do not make it artificial. I mean, just don't fall into the executor. Don't put your church in hell. So let's switch gears here. I want to talk to you. What do I want to talk to you about? Because you speak a lot of eugenics, you speak a lot of the population agenda. Well, let's take a look at Well, the Office of Population Affairs, which is actually a department of the Health and Human Services Department of Gov. You can go there you can search for Office of Population Affairs, hhs.gov.opa. Let me read you a little bit about this. Purpose and mission of the OPA. Title X is the only federal program dedicated solely to the provision of family planning and related preventative services. The Office of Population Affairs, OPA, administers the Title X program and serves as the focal point to advise the Secretary and the Assistant Secretary for Health on a wide range of reproductive health topics, including family planning, adolescent pregnancy, sterilization, and other population issues. Oh, well, gee, I didn't know this existed until you told me about this, Tammy. And let me read one more other little thing here. The office is under the direction of the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Population Affairs, or DASPA, whose responsibilities include implementation of the mandated provisions of the Categorical Family Planning Grant Program, Title X of the Public Health Service Act. You see, it's a service to receive sterilization. One little other thing here. The Office of Population Affairs, or OPA, serves as the focal point to advise the Secretary and Assistant Secretary for Health on a wide range of reproductive health topics, adolescent pregnancy, family planning, and sterilization. So, population issues. Where did this thing start?
This began with Henry Kissinger's study memorandum 200 to the National Security Council. After that was created in 1947 under the National Security Act, which secures the nations over the human being. Dr. Henry Kissinger proposed in his memorandum to the NSC that, quote, depopulation should be the highest priority of U.S. foreign policy towards the, quote, third world. What was created out of that study memorandum was the Office of Population Affairs, which is the depopulation program that was related to in that document.
Lovely. That's just absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Kissinger. If you're listening, I think that you should be first on the list because obviously you're the problem, not us. Wow. So, yeah, I remember perusing Memorandum 200 quite a while ago, and that wasn't there... What was it? 500,000 people was the ideal population of the Earth. Is that correct?
Right, by the year 2035.
2035? That's not too far off, is it?
No, and they're using war, they're using the medical industry, they're using environmentalism as a product of the corporation. And they're designing in your mind that there are such things as useless bread gobblers. So if you see somebody on welfare and it upsets you, they have indoctrinated you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you see a, quote, bum on the street and that upsets you or offends you, you are indoctrinated. You're being taught that your fellow man is less important than you are.
Well, you've accepted status, haven't you? You've accepted that you're a higher form of life because you can somehow have a person that's better. I have a house that I can go to every night and sleep and be warm and have food in the fridge. I'm better because I am employed. That person is unemployed. More concepts, right?
And then the worst part of that concept is that through the educational system itself and classification, those are the 8 stages of genocide. You have to be classified and separated from each other in order to divide and conquer.
Well, gosh,
so
I hate that.
Right, and all of these things, it's absolutely horrifying to watch these things occur as people are calling themselves one thing and calling somebody else another thing. That allows the dehumanization to occur. And in that, the being that's taking up these concepts is allowing murder and mass genocide of themselves.
Yeah, well, do not respect persons. The most important lesson in that darn Bible. In case you missed that, 500,000 people, that's, California and Texas and any single state almost has, I think all of them have more than 500,000 people in a single state. And we're talking world population, right?
Absolutely. And part of this is so quiet. 42 females are being slaughtered each and every day from prescription, quote, overdose deaths. By the end of the year, that's a small city of females that are missing and gone. And nobody's realizing these things, that they are in Nazi Germany all over again.
Well, now, there seems to be two sides to what Nazi Germany actually was. There is the presented ADL, obviously a way to prop up a certain people, create hate crimes laws and bring in Common Core and all the stuff that the ADL and these really, really wealthy lobby groups do. And then there's the people that have actually looked into the history of what happened over there and see a completely different picture. Now, explain your outlook on Nazi Germany. Who created this concept? Now, we know that 1933 is the magical year. That's the same year that both the United States and Germany basically became complete. It was when Roosevelt in March 9th, I think, or April 9th, 1933 was when Congress basically said, okay, President, you can have, as long as there's a declared emergency, you have total power to do anything you want. You're a dictator. And then over in Germany, you had basically the same thing with the Reichstag and the Reich, can't remember the other term. Yeah, there you go. So when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about that. Stay tuned, folks. You're the Corporation Nation. So, okay, now, I led into this Nazi Germany thing for one very important reason. And off the air, we were just kind of discussing this. And again, Tammy makes me see things. She simplifies things, even though what she says is very complicated. She simplifies things. So, Tammy, I basically want you just to repeat. You said, just to lead you in here, the CIA is a production company. Its theater is war. So, apply that to all of the dang wars and occupations and terrorist attacks and everything else we have. See, you don't really think of it this way. If you think of the CIA as nothing more than your typical production company, a theater company that goes out and puts on your crisis actors, whatever. What an easy way to understand what's going on. Please repeat what you said.
In Book 4 of the Church Committee Reports, supplementary detailed staff reports on foreign and military intelligence, on page 12, it says the CIA is a production company. The CIA has facilitated on the ground all known civil wars. They go into an area, they pretend to be Hezbollah or Al-Qaeda or whatever is necessary. They kill citizens, and then all of a sudden, who shows up? The UN, the court systems, the legal system, and these attorneys cashing in on this war, and they offer the protection. And it's the same thing as Genesis, and then the book of Exodus, where Moses comes down from a hill and tells everybody they're harming each other. And the next step is, of course, Leviticus, which is the action of taxation. They offer to protect you for a tax. These are war theaters. The House of Representatives is nothing more than a marquee. You can read about this in the Gelnhausen Charter. The Gelnhausen Charter says, look, we can tell them anything we want to. They're going to forget about it in just a little short amount of time. We can tell them that a dead guy said this. We can tell them all sorts of things, sell them the concepts that they have forefathers and the concepts of everything. And they're going to believe it. They're going to buy into it.
They're going to believe it. They're going to treat it like a religion, aren't they?
Absolutely.
In a corporation nation. So then how does that apply to, say, the threat to the world of Nazi Germany and the threat of World War I and World War II and all of these theater campaigns that we've had in the past?
Well, in 1927, July 26, 1927, file number E.C, docket 2011, judgment number 8. In the Permanent Court of International Justice, which is Congress's court, that's Congress's World Court, for the 12th Ordinary Session, they brought in a case put on by the Bear Corporation that basically said that they had a lot of overhead in Poland. It was costing them too much. They weren't making as much money as they wanted, and it asked the court to indemnify the Polish citizens.
So are you talking about too much welfare being paid out?
And welfare can be in state employ, too. That means doctors and teachers and everybody on state employ, everybody on federal employ. The Reichstag was the federal state. The Reichsrat was when it nationalized. The United States Incorporated is the one who owns the patent on those. In 1802, they indemnified the human being with the 1802 Indemnification Convention. That's when they started the Acts of Enablement, which everybody knows as state constitutions. But they're identical to the 1933 Act of Enablement when Hitler joined with the Confederacy. Hitler joined in with Congress and said, okay, you can indemnify these citizens. And the eugenics program did not start with Hitler. In 1924, Congress was implementing in the Racial Integrity Act of Virginia that we should provide for the integrity of, quote, a race. Well, going back to the evolutionary process, these attorneys are all psychopaths. They're missing the frontal lobe. They are not the same race as the human race. The human being has a frontal lobe.
So what you're saying then is everyone from Churchill to Hitler to Mussolini to all of these people are basically just stage actors in the world, theater, basically.
And funnier than that, because the Queen herself, Queen Elizabeth, is on welfare through the House of Commons. She's a commoner. She's an actress pretending to be a queen in the, quote, United Kingdom. Give me a break. That's an oxymoron. This is all under Congress. The Queen is just an actress.
Yeah.
The royal family is just an actress under Congress.
Well, obviously, the power has been the authority. Obviously, the United States has military bases in 190 countries or something like that. So obviously, the concept of the authority of this. Well, that actually brings me to one thing that we haven't talked about, and we're not going to have time, but Treaty of Westphalia, just maybe a 2-minute summation of what that was. Peace treaty between the Holy Roman Empire and the King of France and their respective allies.
Right, which included Germany, Austria, Slavonia, Croatia, Russia, all of these confederated states, and it only depends on the winner. Roman law is winner take all, and the American Congress became the winner in 1941 when it took it from Winston Churchill. Him and Roosevelt had entered into the Atlantic Charter, giving Congress world governance. At that time, it was all in the bag. Roman law can be practiced by these attorneys. Slavic law, Scottish law, all of these laws are products of that corporation.
It's international. In other words, it's not a fixed thing. Rome is sort of a moving concept. It doesn't matter where it is as long as it has a base.
Right.
And they're all basically we believe in the Game of Thrones. We believe in the concept of countries and nations and everything. But in fact, we are all. I mean, it's just a play. It's just a presentation, right? It's a representation of something that actually of what should be.
Right, and that's what Jesus said. You are already. You are, I am. That's a state of being. That thing is just a presentation. That thing is a marquee. The House of Representatives is a marquee, a circus tent. It puts on acts. Acts. Congressional acts are plays by a playbook, and they're facilitated by attorneys on the ground. And that is relative to the German Stasi. You've got Child Protection Services under the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. It generates revenue. You have the Adult Protection Services under the IRS. These are
and this goes right into the concept of Malthusian T.R. Malthus from 1815 and The Nature of Rent. Another thing you can find on the Avalon website, The Nature of Rent. Highly recommend. What did that do?
It allowed them to rent water, to rent land, to rent everything, including the human being. But it's never under a relative state. They're not relative. They're not real. You need to kick them out and stop patronizing that thing. You are the thing that's creating it by taking it up as a concept.
So participation makes it, quote unquote, real, and of course, real actually means artificial when you get down to it. So it's so ironic that the only reason this thing exists is because, again, going back to the education process, we have been indoctrinated to be patriotic to the very thing that we allow to enslave us through patronization. It's amazing.
Absolutely, and Jesus said it most clearly. Call no man your father, not even Christ. Don't call it your dad.
Yeah, don't respect persons. Everything about this, every country, every nation, a person is described and defined as a corporation, an individual. The revelation, the great revelation is simply to wake up to your darn self. And it's really that simple, isn't it?
It is, and it's that beautiful as well, because once you watch that, it's like nothing else. As I see people wake up, it's like these flowers that are coming out, and it's the most amazing thing to witness. Yeah,
and, well, I hear the music, so we're unfortunately out of time. We could go on for hours, couldn't we? But, unfortunately. Tammy has another show after this. Tell people again where they can listen to you.
Right, we'll be on TammyPepperman.org, No Borders Radio right now with the public law coming up in about 2 minutes.
And Thursdays and Saturdays on freedomslips.com. TammyPepperman.org. Highly recommend. All our shows are on YouTube as well. Thanks so much for joining me. We'll be back Monday. Take care.